Hello, everybody. My name is Daniela. I am the co-founder and CTO at Momento. We offer serverless computing services to other companies.
Yeah, and my name is Allen Helton. I'm an ecosystem engineer also at Momento. I do a lot of public facing stuff and talking about the new features that we're coming out with to get people excited for them because I'm excited about everything that we do.
Yeah, totally, Alan. So we're here today to talk about a couple new features. Let's start with fine-grained access control. Some people abbreviate it to be called FGAC, so we'll be referring it to FGAC. So tell us a little bit about what FGAC is and why it's important for our users.
Yep. So fine-grained access control is the best way I can describe it that people would know is it's a permission set. So to use any of the Momento SDKs, you have to initialize clients with an API token. And with fine-grained access control, you can scope these tokens down so your SDK clients can only access a limited set of things. So, for example, we have our topic solution. We can say that you can be a subscribe only role where a client's not allowed to publish anything. And in addition to that, we could also say not only can you only subscribe, but you can also only subscribe to this set of topics. So I can't go in and eavesdrop on the goings on of other people's data. It's an absolutely necessary piece to any production application. You can't, I wouldn't legitimately say to use any of these things in production if we didn't have things like fine-grained access control.
Yeah, makes sense. So from a security perspective, given your past work experience as well, it sounds like definitely like everyone should be thinking about restricting access when it's needed.
100%. Principle of least privilege. Only give people access to the things that they need access to. Anything beyond that is a potential security threat. And in this day and age, we don't really have any tolerance for that anymore.
Yeah, definitely not. Okay, so tell me a little bit about this token. How do I get one? Where does it really fit in a typical web application or application workflow?
Yeah, so we have a web SDK that allows builders to connect and communicate with Momento directly inside of a browser. So whether you're building a chat application or you're building an asset management application that needs direct access to a cache without hitting your own servers, you will initialize these clients on an end user PC. So what you want to do is you want to feed these browsers short-lived, limited scope tokens. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. If you're using a front-end framework that has server-side rendering, you can limit the scope down based on the page that these people are accessing and pass down a short-lived token. So when you initialize the client, it only has access to what you're doing. You can also, in a more production-ready scenario, build an endpoint and an API that looks at user records. It looks at your auth token, knows who you are, knows what you have access to, and then dynamically create these tokens using the Momento auth client in our SDKs. So you can say this person has access to read and write to these caches or publish and subscribe to these specific topics. So it's really a server-side thing that's determining what access the end users, the clients, the browsers have access to.
It's interesting because I think without this fine-grained access control, without FGAC, my experience, I've been coding in the back end more than the front end, but it feels like it's essentially you need to add a server in between to retrieve the data that the client needs, and no more, no less, and then pass it on to the client, right? So there's always this sort of almost proxying of data. With something like FGAC, if I'm understanding correctly, I can essentially figure out the principle of least privilege, hand the token to the client so that it can come to Momento directly and ask for the data it needs, thereby bypassing a whole bunch of logic and complexity in sort of the server having to play middleman. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yes, yes. And to put a more tangible example on something
Yeah.
like that, let's say you're building a multi-tenanted system and you have your cache separated accordingly. So I have a cache for tenant A, cache for tenant B, cache for tenant C. Part of authenticating and authorizing a user could see, okay, this user is a part of tenant B. So I am going to create this auth token on the server side that only gives me read access to cache for tenant B. That
Mhm.
way, if they try to, be noisy neighbors or creep in on other tenants, they wouldn't be able to. They'd get an authorization error.
Yeah, you're giving the token literally to the device that tenant B is using, so they have access to the token. So you wouldn't want them to have access to other tenants' caches or resources in general. That's pretty cool. So let's talk about the next feature, another new feature that we released recently, which is Momento HTTP. So Momento, conventionally, our SDKs use gRPC for high performance and request multiplexing on the same connection, which has various benefits for our customers. Now, of course, gRPC is not always supported on various platforms and devices, whereas HTTP is pretty much supported anywhere today in the modern age of the internet. So we introduced the HTTP support recently, and from your perspective, Alan, what are some of the benefits of having HTTP alongside gRPC?
So what I really like about HTTP API, the fact that we have that, it's a huge enabler because not everybody A likes to use SDKs or B has the ability to use an SDK. Not everything needs code around it. Sometimes you just want to fetch on an endpoint.
Mm.
So I come from a pretty heavy AWS background, and there's a lot of things that get unlocked with the ability to not run code to access your cache or your topics. For example, if you are using DynamoDB and you have a stream off of it whenever data changes, you can stream the data change and then use something like an EventBridge API destination to call the HTTP endpoint to automatically put that data change inside of your cache. You can transform the data, put it into the cache, no Lambda function necessary, and then boom, out of the box, you have a write-aside cache. So you're going to greatly increase your cache hit rates directly as a result of having that HTTP integration.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that you don't need to invoke yet another Lambda just to do that operation, right? Like that can just be like an HTTP put call right inside the event bridge trigger.
That's right. Yeah, you can use a stream to an EventBridge pipe directly to an EventBridge API destination. So there's no compute that you pay for, which is extremely nice because it almost just makes it so Momento can act like your primary data store because your data is always going to be up to date, and you don't have to run compute to keep your cache hot.
That's great. That's awesome. I have a cool one for you as well in terms of cool use cases. Now that we have FGAC and HTTP support, so we work with a lot of IoT customers. Wise Labs is one of our great partners and customers. They have millions of these IoT security camera devices, and continuously streaming and uploading image and video data to the cloud. Now, using Momento, they can upload these images via the HTTP API. Again, you have these small devices. They're looking for lightweight libraries like that's HTTP based and not an SDK like the gRPC one that we have. So they can use HTTP to upload these images, and the restrictions for these cameras are quite restricted down to the exact key or the image name, so that the cameras one at a time only has access to upload one way. On the other hand, the devices that download these images can call HTTP GET directly. It's as if I'm just sending you a URL. You can click on the URL and download the image directly from your phone or from your browser. It's pretty cool. And your privilege is restricted to just downloading that image. So again, they're security camera companies, so security is top of mind for them. So FGAC really unlocked this complete end-to-end workflow for them. Yeah, that's a cool use case I thought I'd share with you. I don't know if you had others in mind, sort of combining the powers of the two.
No, well, first I want to just talk about that one. That's a really cool thing because a lot of people might not have made the connection that what you just said is basically pre-signed URLs.
Yeah,
So being able to put something in a cache means that thumbnail for that camera is only going to be alive for let's say 5 minutes. Let's just say they take a screenshot and make that your thumbnail every 5 minutes. So automatically deletes if it doesn't get any data. It is scoped to just the one thumbnail for the one camera for that token, which doesn't really get any more finer grain than that. And that's actually really exciting. I've built integrations inside of S3 that generate pre-signed URLs, and that's not easy. It's actually quite a burden to be able to open that door and pass that down. So being able to do something as simple as a HTTP call without going through all the header definition and whatnot, just by creating an auth token scoped just to that one item, it's a big improvement for developer experience.
Totally. And anybody can do this. It's sort of, we have code examples for this as well. Once I saw this cool use case on the IoT device, I started noticing it everywhere as well. When you use any kind of delivery app, nowadays there's usually a picture to prove that the delivery has been completed. That's like a very temporary picture, right? People pretty much only care about it for a period of time to ensure that they have evidence that was delivered to the right place. That picture gets uploaded somewhere. A lot of the time it is S3 as a pre-signed URL, and it gets displayed on the end user's device. So yeah, once we unlock this use case, I'm seeing it everywhere in my life, and just thinking about places where the Momento HTTP API can be combined with the powers of FGAC to realize this use case really easily.
I love that so much. That's so cool. And another thing that you can do is you can use the HTTP API along with the scope tokens on edge networks. So if you're not comfortable bringing even temporary limited scope tokens down to a browser, which not everybody is, and that's totally acceptable to not, you can run these things on edge networks like Netlify and Cloudflare, because it doesn't require the use of SDKs that may or may not be supported on the edge. Those are very limited sandbox environments. Not everything runs over there, but everything can fetch something from a URL. So bringing that closer in a safe way to your users is another really big deal, another big use case that we've unlocked as a result of both of these things.
Totally. And we'll include some example code that we have as well for people's reference if they want to take a look at how to do those integrations on their own. I think it's time to wrap up. It was great chatting with you today, Allen. Always a fun conversation. Sometimes I unlock use cases, like the EventBridge one was something that I wasn't even aware of. So always good to learn more about our own products in conversations with you.
Absolutely. Yes, it was great talking to you. Super excited about all the stuff that we're doing. This is a big enabler for builders. I'm very happy that we're moving this direction.
Awesome. So until next time.
All right. Bye.